I suppose it's now time for an Angry Joe update because it's been a while since I've really talked about him in any meaningful capacity. It's not really something that like I've been super focused on. I kind of like acknowledge like him not covering Tears of the Kingdom, but there hasn't really been anything to talk about. But I do think that like one of the things that like really needs to be addressed, something that I don't think a lot of people talk about, is his weird obsession with like The Last of Us, right? Because of course, like no, Joe played The Last of Us, like when it remastered on the PS4. He played The Last of Us Part Two. He's like watched the HBO show, and he's like given glowing reviews to all of that, like including to a very strong extent defending The Last of Us Part 2, trying to pretend it had like really good production values and writing and like, no, the Naughty Dog are some of the best in the industry. Bullshit. Like I said it then and I said it now. He was absolutely running damage control for that company, right? He was trying to do his very best to try and like spin it as being like, oh, it's a good game. It just has some wonky aspects to it, like particularly the ending. Like he is absolutely the sort of person who will try to convince you that The Last of Us Part 2 was misunderstood, right? And we've seen that to a certain extent with like when it came to the HBO show and like these guys like shilling for it and like doing everything they possibly could to like hype it up as the next big thing. And now like recently, with the last like Angry Joe newscast, right? Naughty Dog CEO, the co-CEO retired, leaving like Druckmann fully in charge. And like Joe's like sitting there listening to this, and he's just like, "Oh man, we're gonna get The Last of Us Part 3." And I'm just like, what would elicit that reaction? That's such a weird reaction to have at like the news that like a CEO retired, especially since like Druckmann was already a CEO and that he's already like acknowledged that like The Last of Us Part 3 might happen and like where exactly is the story going to go after Part 2? Like this was kind of the problem with Part 2 to begin with. Like what exactly is the story in these games? Like Part 2 doesn't even feel like it takes place in a post-apocalyptic society anymore, right? Like it just feels like Druckmann wanted to like, do something profound and different and like, revenge bad. Like we're gonna have Abby kill Joel and then make her sympathetic. Like, it just doesn't work, right? Like it is a poorly written story, a poorly conceived idea, and not enough people really shit on it enough. Like just like how they don't talk enough about how The Last of Us, the original, was not all that well produced, engaging, or interesting. The Last of Us was always bad, right? But like the weird trend I've been seeing over the past several years is like to try and like rewrite history into saying that like The Last of Us Part 2 was actually really good, right? And I do think this is like a weird thing with like game journalists in particular, where like The Last of Us Part 2 is still being talked about as being like a legitimately good game, even if it's not like making like top 100 lists. Actually, I'll have to look at like IGN's top 100 list and see if it's on there. But like typically, what happens is that like right now they try to say that like the original Last of Us is like one of the best games ever made, and then two is just like just not quite on the same level, right? That's kind of how they're spinning it, and they've been doing that for a long time. And now it's like I it does feel like Angry Joe and his contemporaries, people in like the gaming journalism sphere, the gaming YouTubers, really have an invested interest in protecting Neil Druckmann, Naughty Dog, and The Last of Us, right? These guys have been like, bending over backwards to try and justify their creative decisions, their behavior, their tactics, and their games, right? Their products, right? Like these guys have been like, damage controlling every bad decision, like being going to bat for them at every opportunity. And now, like, when the CEO of Naughty Dog retires, now that Neil Druckmann has full control, anybody who has like any real knowledge of Druckmann or the structure at Naughty Dog, they know that's not a good thing. They know that Druckmann doesn't have the talent to produce anything worthwhile. They know that The Last of Us Part 2 was entirely his idea. Like they know that we're just gonna get more of that kind of thing, and that's not something that anybody wants to play. Like regardless of what like Joe wants you to believe, right? And I kind of have to wonder if like he's legit being paid to like sponsor Naughty Dog and sponsor these kind of developers, because it's so weird how this guy gets excited at the thought of a game that doesn't even hasn't even been revealed to exist yet. And while he ignores stuff like The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom, Pikmin 4, Fire Emblem Engage, Cereza and the Lost Demon, Advance Wars Reboot Camp, like all these great Switch games that he just ignores, right? Doesn't know anything about, doesn't talk about them at all, doesn't address them, doesn't care about them, and like gets angry every time they get brought up, especially at the Game Awards. And like that kind of makes me wonder. Like this is like an official Cody Lee prediction, by the way. I think we are going to see more Angry Joe spurging this E3 when Nintendo takes away like a lot of the Game of Year awards, right? Particularly like Tears of the Kingdom. I think it's like a shoe in for this at this point that Tears of the Kingdom is going to be Game of the Year 2023. But I think this also extends to a lot of other things as well. Particularly best video game adaptation, which very well might be Super Mario Bros. And best strategy game. Pikmin 4, which I don't know what its competition is, and I don't even personally consider like Pikmin at 4 a strategy game, but like I think the Game Awards will consider it a strategy game, and they will give it to Pikmin 4. Like I can't think of anything that's like outsold it this year that's like bigger or more relevant. And like Angry Joe like is really particular. Like that was what Angry Joe got mad at last year. Like best strategy game Mario Rabbids became a meme. Like I think we're gonna see the same thing this year with like all of these like other Nintendo victories. And I think it's not just gonna be like those three, but like it might be something else. But like I think we are gonna see like legit him legitimately getting upset at like Nintendo stuff at this showcase, right? Like it was really off putting last year and the year before that. I think it might get worse this year, and I do think a big part of that is because like he's not being paid to sponsor Nintendo content. He's supposed to sell like Disney stuff, Marvel stuff, mobile games, like annual sports releases, and like Naughty Dog products, right? Like that's what his that's what the gaming audience is supposed to be into. But like more and more we're seeing people move away from that stuff into like favoring more Nintendo products, right? Pikmin 4 has been like surprisingly successful, and this guy hasn't been covering it at all. He hasn't been addressing it. He's never even been like, I doubt he even knows what a Pikmin is, right? That's how little respect I have for Angry Joe. But like I think we are in this situation where a lot of YouTubers like this. A lot of people who, spent their careers like shilling against Nintendo and doing everything they possibly can to like downplay everything they do. Like a lot of these people are going to be put in a very uncomfortable position as like The Last of Us becomes like more and more of a toxic IP, as Zelda becomes bigger, as Mario becomes bigger, as Pokemon like dominates, as like Splatoon becomes bigger. Like there's nothing really that they can do to stop what's coming, right? Like the end of the PlayStation era, the end of the third party, like Cabal, and like the rise of like Nintendo as like the market leader that it always should have been, right? Like it's just a complete joke. It's just a complete joke to see these guys like swear by like anti-Nintendo nonsense their entire lives, right? It's not even just about the career at this point. Like these guys are gonna be like trying to rally against Nintendo until they're dead. Like that's how bad it is. Like Review Tech USA is like 1 foot in the grave already, right? Like that's how bad it is. It's just surreal. Like seeing these guys like constantly go to such lengths to downplay everything Nintendo does while hyping up Naughty Dog and hyping up Sony and hyping up this or that. Like, I don't even know what the last game Angry Joe talked about was, right? Like, and meanwhile, I've been playing dozens and dozens of great Nintendo Switch games. It's bizarre. More and more, I hope that people start noticing that there's a problem and that people start addressing that there is an issue with how Angry Joe conducts himself and his business.